Hey everybody, this is Perch, and people talk about DC being done this year. The company's nearly at its end. Everything else, and it with good reason. A lot of these people are high level AT&T executives. They're in those rooms. AT&T spends at least 60 minutes a day talking about DC's current publishing financial health. It's very much top of their mind. So it's reasonable that people. I'm sorry, that's too much sarcasm. Anyway, I'm sorry, that just earned me like 50 downvotes. The comment I want to make is let's for the moment forget about who's leaving when and what's going out. And let's instead talk about what would be the consequences, what would happen to the market, to the industry, if DC vanished, if they imploded, if they went away. Or for that matter, let's just keep it spicy. What if Marvel? Well, let's just say, what if one of the big two, DC or Marvel, were done? We wake up one morning and Bleeding Cool's got a headline, final bloodbath, the final salute. No, don't say that. The final moment in DC and Marvel's history as they have decided no more comics. They have, and everybody's got like the Scarlet Witch Wanda picture, only it says no more comics. They've photoshopped out mutants and everybody's using that. That's what's going on. You woke up and this is what you see, and one of those two big companies is folded. What would happen? Rather than let's take it out of fantasy territory and actually do some scenario building. What would happen if one of them went away? Well, what would happen would be fairly catastrophic, and let me explain why. Two comics. Again, we have to define everything here. Those two companies, for better or worse, whether you like them or you hate them, they set the tone for the comic industry. When I say set the tone, I mean the page rates. I mean a lot of the business practices. It's a lot of the intangibles that most people don't necessarily think about. It's that they're setting a lot of the shipping schedules. If Marvel vanished, Diamond is likely insolvent at that point, or very close to it. Diamond would really be in severe trouble if Marvel decided to Scarlet Witch away the comics. It would be devastating to Diamond, and that and then that in turn would become devastating to all the indies. The indies would suddenly there'd be a massive scramble for kind of new models and everything else. What would be funny is the wrong word, because none of this would be funny, but what would be painfully, bitterly ironic, maybe is that the term you want to use? Why not? Is that in many cases, a lot of the things people would be scrambling to do are things that they should have done arguably at any point over the last 15 years, in terms of figuring out other distribution sources, finding new ways to connect with their customers and everything else, rather than rely on Diamond. You would be amazed, and again, you could go across the board of small publishers, and they view Diamond as like the final step of the journey to being a company. It's like, I got my contract with Diamond. I'm ready to go. I'm done. I've heard those exact words. I'm done. And in many ways, you're right. You are done. You just don't. But that is the problem. So suddenly you would see a lot of indies radically struggling to figure out what to do, where to go, how to get stuff published. It would cause severe troubles if Marvel left Diamond. Now, obviously, DC's already left Diamond, so them going away completely doesn't impact Diamond. But even there would be still a little bit of an impact to Diamond, because you've got a lot of talent, a lot of people in comics who work for one of these two companies that would suddenly need to go somewhere else. So the buyers, the nature of the market would be page rates would drop. Suddenly there'd be a lot of people scrambling over a very small amount of jobs, and a lot of people wouldn't have work, and so they would be immediately trying to suddenly be like, hey, what's this creator-owned thing again? I should probably figure that out. Hang on, Kickstarter, Indiegogo. The one interesting part of this would be the second that one of the two big publishers fell and stopped producing work. Suddenly, that argument about should you do Kickstarter or should you do Indiegogo, and is Indiegogo like a hate platform and I can't put my comic there, or is Kickstarter a big socialist platform, I can't put my comic there? So you would be surprised how few people would be having those conversations, because suddenly it would be get that comic anywhere. Like it would, the goal would change so dramatically. You'd see people like something like, I never had a problem with Indiegogo. What are you talking about? It would be interesting how quickly some of that stuff would shift around. But the biggest impact that, or the maybe the most immediate, the middle term impact, is that a bunch of people, a bunch of current creators would move on. Like suddenly you'd see people starting to get jobs in the game industry, being baristas, whatever it happens to be. You just see a lot of people just exit the comic industry. And again, this video is really trying to play into what would happen. It's up to you whether you think anybody deserves that to be happen or not. It's not what I'm doing here. It's really suddenly you would have just a much smaller pool of people. The other factor is, then we get to the comic shops, and here's where every comic shop that had not transitioned their business to back issues or to things that are not new monthly comics, meaning if you're a comic shop, look at your revenue. If greater than 30%, 30 or 1/3, 33.3%, if greater than that amount of money is coming from new comics, then that's trouble for you. That's a problem. And you should be fixing that today, not tomorrow. And by the way, you shouldn't be fixing this because you believe that in June or July or whatever the month is that people be talking about, that DC is going to go away. Because well, whatever. You shouldn't be doing it for that reason, because chances are, DC is going to be publishing comics in September. Just Vegas odds, smart money, they will. And chances are Marvel will too. You should be doing that because it's stabilizing your business. Never make business choices out of fear. Make business choices out of smart, forward planning decisions. And so the forward planning decision you should be making is how to get your comics out, how to have stable business. That's what you should be doing. So get your revenue from new comics, monthly comics, down under 1/3. And further, if you can. I mean, the healthiest business is one where you don't have any one segment of your business over 20%. That's great. Very, very hard to accomplish in comics, but more power to you. Get that. But even the places that have got all back issues are still going to have troubles, because if the source, one of the two big sources, stops producing new monthly comics, eventually your shop is going to become like a vinyl record store. You can survive on that, but not all of you will survive. There will not be 500 comic stores. There will be 50. That's just the nature of the business. You can become like the specialty, but again, you have fully embraced what the industry is clamoring about, which is your audience is going to age out. That's what's going to happen. The other ugly thing is that if one of these two, if Marvel or DC stops printing comics, so they decide to be done, there's a decent chance that the other would be quickly behind it. Because a part of what keeps Marvel and DC going as the big two in publishing is competition with each other and putting out comics. If suddenly that competition is removed, then there starts to be a lot of questions, certainly about the viability of the business. As I already mentioned, I think comic shops are in deep trouble. I think the distributor is in deep trouble. If it's Marvel, there's major troubles. And if you've been thinking, hey, do I want to keep producing monthly comics, or is it time to just go ahead and, screw it? We'll do some marketing on digital, and we'll do some graphic novels and all the rest. If that's been a thought, half of basically the two big publishers represent a huge chunk of monthly comics. And if one of those just suddenly vanishes and you're competing alone, you do start to ask the question of, why am I competing at all? You just wouldn't. You'd start to put more effort into looking for your own business. It's a little bit like the case, what happened to the WWE when the WCW folded or basically got purchased and stopped existing. It hurt the WWE. You can look at their ratings. It's a constant decline. Competition in this case drives volume, and it does drive interest. If you take half of that interest or half of that volume away, then what's left behind is a struggle. Marvel fans and DC fans, hardcore fans, hate to admit this, and many won't. They will die on that hill. They need the other company to survive. Very few people are all in, 100% in on Marvel or 100% in on DC. They do sample product from the other companies. They certainly have their favorites, but they're more in the middle than even they like to admit. And there's nothing, there's nothing particularly weird or wrong about that. Creators are jumping ship, constantly. So is it that weird that, the comics might too? It's not weird at all. It's quite normal that that fans would hop with creators they love. Like if you're a huge fan of Jim Lee and Jim Lee is doing the X-Men and suddenly Jim Lee's overdoing Batman, you're telling me you wouldn't collect Batman? I mean, most people would. So the comic industry does need each other. The big two need each other to survive, and I think that's an ugly, harsh fact that a lot of people don't want to admit for whatever reason. At any rate, the summary here, it would be bad. It would be bad for the comic industry unless you're one of the people who's like, I'm angry. They've made me angry, and I just want them all to suffer and be punished and burn it all down. If that's your view, then absolutely, one of these two big companies folding is going to give you what you want, and it's probably going to take out the other one too eventually. So if that's the end game for you. So if that's what you want, then that's what you'd get. But in general, this it would have a lot of side effects. I've heard some comments like, "Hey, if one of the big two folded or both folded, then everyone would start doing crowdfunding Indiegogos." And the reality is, some would, but many would not. Many would just call it a day because there. If think about it, if all this talent suddenly flooded into crowdfunding, first off, many of them wouldn't make it. They don't have either the business sense or the ability or the capabilities to run that stuff all on their own. And for many, it just wouldn't be worth it. You can go and get a safe, 120,000 a year job being a graphic designer for Amazon. Go do that. Like that's a much smarter idea than, and you get your benefits and you get some stock and 401k and all life's great. Like, why would you be messing around with, crowdfunding campaigns where you may, or if you're not a big name and you don't have the ability to get, big money from that, you'd be crazy not to take the safe job, of course. But you would see some big names certainly do well with it, and that's fine too. And chances are you're going to see that anyway. The interesting part about crowdfunding, I think, is the names that can generate money in crowdfunding, the bigger names who are able to do it. Over the next 2 or 3 years, they're going to do it, regardless of whether anything happens to the big two or not, because with clear signs that Disney and AT&T and these big corporations control their future, that they're just gonna they're gonna want to take some control into their own hands. So if they have the skill, the business acumen, the idea, the relationships, whatever it happens to be, if they have the ability to make a go at crowdfunding, chances are they're going to do it. If they're going to, but you think about it this way: if a creator is too frightened to go and do a crowdfunding campaign or basically build something to own themselves, they don't feel they could do it, and instead they're happy working as an independent contractor, job by job, or almost month by month for Marvel. Then if you take Marvel or DC out of the picture and suddenly they have, the only way to be in comics is to do crowdfunding, they're most likely going to fail, because if they had the ability to succeed, they would have done it. Does that make any sense? I think that's I've heard this concept of like, hey, DC will go and suddenly there will be 60 people with crowdfunded comics and they'll all make $1 million. It's like that there's no way that's going to happen. But most of those creators will not demand that kind of money, and many of them will not get it started in the first place because they don't know what to do. So some will make it. Those who will make it probably are going to do it regardless over the next year. That's my opinion anyway. Anyway, I think it's bad. I think one of these two companies going away is bad overall because there's so many ripple effects that would go on in the industry. It would be unhealthy. That's why you're never going to hear me root for that outcome. And again, if you do, that's your business. I'm not here to tell you how to think. You can certainly root for that outcome. I'm not going to call you names. I'm not going to say you're bad. I'm not going to say you're stupid, a villain, or any of that kind of stuff. If you've been pushed to a point where you just want one of these companies to disappear, I'm going to go ahead and give you the benefit of the doubt that what got you to that place, and that's your business. I'm not going to tell you how to feel. Seriously, I hate this kind of snide like, if you wish ill on somebody else, you're a bad person. It's like, that's your business. You manage your own life. I'm not going to manage your life. Anyway, tell me what you think. What have I forgotten, or what have I missed? What would happen if one of the big companies would go under? What would occur? Let me know in the comments below. Give me your opinions on it. Like and subscribe. Follow me on social media. Send me an email. Most importantly, thanks for listening.